Okay, it's about 5 after. It's time to get going. Welcome, everybody. It's the WASM Filters meeting for Monday, July 19th. We have a light set of topics today. We had quite a few topics last week. We might have burned some people out. I'm not sure. There were a number of people that presented. I think we had 3 different presentations. I know we've got some follow-up on those presentations. And I don't know if that's going to be happening today. So we've got Pranav, who sends regrets. I believe he's got exams going on. And so I think that's his deal for this week and next as well. The rest of you, if you're on the call, please, drop your name in. Now, Gaurav, do you want to, should we list out RJSF as a potential topic?
Yeah, we can discuss it at then.
Okay. Let me put that first. Okay, anybody else have topics today? So we've got Gaurav, Navendu, Lee. Is Utkarsh with us? Can someone ping Utkarsh? Srivastava. Cool. Okay, and then with that, so we've got anybody else that's new on the call for the first time today? I don't know if there's Aditya, have you been on these calls before? Mr.
No, sir.
Das?
No, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you want to take just a moment and say hi? Just do a quick introduction.
Hello, I'm Aditya. I am basically from India, and I'm looking forward to contribute and learn from this community. That's all. Thank you.
Beautiful. Nice to have you. Yeah, nice to have you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so quick recap of discussions that we had last time, kind of to help orient us for things that we're going to talk about now. So this meeting itself is relatively fresh. So we've been meeting about a month now, I suppose. And the topic of filters and WebAssembly and Envoy and managing of service meshes has been something we've been talking about in the Layer 5 community since it was established, actually. Filters have been lesser of a focus earlier on. They've become more and more so a focus as some of our initiatives advance. We get, the community itself gets larger and larger, that we get more and more projects. And so it came to a point a month ago or a little more than a month ago, that there were enough people here focused on filters, WebAssembly filters, and how to manage them, how they work, and some related projects to them, not just WebAssembly filters, but filters in general. And so we formed this call. Last time that we met, last week, we had presentations from, if I recall, from Samir, from Pranav, from Anirban. Anirban wasn't given a lot of time toward the end. And so his presentation got cut a little bit short. Part of what he is, I think, intending to come back with is a deeper dive into Envoy's current capabilities for traffic mirroring. Ultimately, we want to get into traffic capturing and have that facilitated, and have a number of use cases facilitated through Meshery. So I'm going to list out things potentially for next meeting. One of those is that presentation. The rest, like if for those who weren't on last week's call, the recording for this meeting goes up on YouTube relatively quickly. These links, the links to each of the slides should, oh, we're missing this one. Can someone volunteer to follow up with Anirban on actually I don't think that may not be necessary. If for all of you that have access, that are members of the community, you'll have access to the Layer 5 community drive. I think each of those gentlemen had dropped their presentations into the presentations folder. And so Anir Bonds, I believe, is in here. So this was one of them. So we'll have to get links going on, but let me drop this in just in case. This was Samir's. So Anir Bonds was a different one. But the rest of the presentations are here as well. Okay. Okay, so today maybe we'll end early. That might be nice. So Gaurav, do you want to talk to us about React JSON schema form? What that is and what we're doing with it and where we're finding challenges?
Sure. Just a minute. Okay. Yep. So talking about the RGFS, so what we are trying to do with the RGFS and what RGFS exactly is. So you can see my reference PR with the functionality as RGFS. So what exactly we are doing with the RGFS, we are using to pass the rate limit filter. Okay, let me show that. Okay, is Rudraksh is on the call. Rudraksh, can you please share the link of the rate limit filter by Pranav, but chat that will be more easy.
So do we want the filter or the entire configuration?
Yes, just that PR with the
Okay.
Rust, the YAML code.
Okay, so a little bit of context, I guess, for everyone that's maybe not familiar with the discussion here, that is that within Meshery, it helps manage, Meshery allows you to load up filters that you want to apply to your Envoy-based service meshes. And along with the filter, there's a binary, the filter itself. There's then also some amount of configuration that you would pass along to the service mesh to have it, to tell it where you would like to deploy the filter. And then there's also some amount of filter specific configuration that you might want to pass along to the filter itself, like the type of, depending upon what type of filter it is, it may or may not require some amount of customization, some amount of configuration. Which is, and that would be all specific to the actual filter, whatever type that is, while the configuration of how to apply the filter to the service mesh, that's configuration of the service mesh itself. So a little bit of a distinction between these two types of configuration. And so, the understanding that there's a lot of that Meshery is designed to be as dynamic as possible, that the environments that it manages and the different service meshes that it manages are certainly not known up front. Some of that is known with respect to the fact that it manages different types of service meshes, but how those meshes are configured, what applications they're running, what versions of Envoy, what filters they would like to have deployed, all of that's dynamic. And so the UI itself. So the system, Meshry as a system and Meshry's UI as part of that need to be dynamic and need to be dynamically driven to the extent that the UI doesn't hard code certain configurable fields, because what those fields are and what those values are, in the example here, like that can be entirely subject to the type of filter that's running. And so that's the topic at hand that Gaurav is going to
Yeah.
discuss.
Thanks, Lee, for that. So as you know that from the RGFS, we will be going to customize our filter. Okay. Yep. So with the RGFS, we'll be able to create configurations. Yeah, with that configurations, the user can add the parameters, rule types, and all. So if the user is not having any kind of filter already on its UI, so he can create a new one from the RGFS with the custom styles and parameters, all the rate limit, rule types, and all with that. So currently, what is our barrier for the RGFS is that we have a basic model with the RGFS, but a non-functioning model. So the barrier is that we are not able to style this RGFS schema. So because they have just hard coded inside the UI or something. So it's also a call for volunteers who also want to style this RGFS. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So as part of of the library that's being used in Meshry UI, this is a prominent one, this React JSON schema form. It helps the UI be dynamic, and it helps Meshry's UI display the appropriate components at runtime based on what is or is not configurable for a given filter. And so as we go to use this library, the styling of it is necessary. And so Gaurav, do you have an example of us using this and of the project using this, and then
Sure.
where it needs to be styled?
Let me take from this. Let me show it directly from here. So commands first. So yeah, with this thing, what we get with this YAML that was provided by Pranav Bhatt. So we are having the currently model which shows all the rule types and parameters we can add over here. So what the basic functionality we need to have is that the validation of this should also be enabled, and the major thing is that we need to style this component, because in the RGFS they are just hard coded this, that we cannot remove this all what I should say, that cards and components and all.
Okay, cool. So I get it now. Like the topic that you wanted to discuss was really kind of a call for volunteers, or a call for people to engage on those that are maybe front end focused.
Yes.
Within this React.js library, as we go to use it, we need to get really familiar with it. We're going to use it, or Meshry will use it pervasively. And so the styling of it is something we need to become adept at. I'm not sure so a good call for volunteers was actually on the call that we had 2 hours ago, the website's call, because there's a lot of front end focused people there. Anyone on this call into React JS? Oh, Aditya Chatterjee, yeah. So Gaurav, I think you have a hand raised with Aditya Chatterjee.
Okay, sure.
That's great. Okay, very, very good. Gaurav, anything else that we want to discuss on this?
No, not for this.
Okay. Do we, just while we have you, we don't happen to have, I wonder if you might be able to share the latest filters UI in Meshery's UI.
Yep, I'll share that in few minutes. I'll
Okay.
just run up the server node.
Yep, sounds good. Yeah, I know that you end up sharing that on the Meshery call. But I don't
Yep.
know that, yeah, good. But then there's a little bit of a different audience here. And so not everybody has seen the, boy, I can't find not everyone has seen the latest enhancements to Meshery's UI for managing filters. So.
Sure, I'll just do that.
So nothing like getting put on the spot. So Gaurav, we'll circle back in just a couple of minutes to take a look. So I think what we'll see from you is the ability to load filters, edit their config, apply them as well. So that's good. In the meantime, Nivendu, do you want to talk to us about, well, I guess kind of a similar topic, really?
Yeah, sure. So I have been working on like adding the ability in Meshery to deploy filters via patterns. So like I can just share my screen to show my progress. Okay, so this is the filter UI. I don't know if it has been updated yet, but now we are able to upload filter files. So what we can basically do is we can upload a wasm file. So I have this test.wasm and I can upload it. And then if you go to this endpoint, we can it will basically serve this wasm file, and we can use this in patterns. Let me see if I can. Okay. Let me see. So if we go to patterns, and I have a sample pattern that does this. Let me just. So in here, what we can do is we can point this, point the wasm file to the Meshery URL. This basically this URL, and what it should do is it should actually fetch this pattern file and then apply it to the mesh. So. But I have some problems running Istio in my machine, so I was not able to test this. But yeah, like if someone is like working here could just test this and verify if we are able to actually work with this, then it would be great.
Nice. And so Abhishek, were you testing this, giving this an end-to-end test from MeshMap previously?
Yeah, as me and Soham were testing it, and we had found a lot of. I've given the list of issues that we faced.
Nice. And those were a lot of those largely for MeshMap and not for Meshery UI?
It's also for Meshery UI. It's equally for Meshery UI as well.
Okay. Were you able to,
on the JSF component.
okay. Were you able to apply a filter using the pattern approach?
Yeah, I was able to apply the filter for certain resources, and for some of them they weren't working. Like for example, Istio virtual services weren't working, and I was able to get it working for other resources like deployment services and
Okay.
so
But specifically, like in context of this call, the filters call?
Envoy filter resource. Let me just pull up that one.
Okay, good. And so of what Gaurav was going to demo, I think what Navendu is showing is essentially the same thing. So Navendu, do you mind bringing that back up just to let that soak in for some folks?
Yeah, sure.
So the goal, so to help give frame of reference for everyone, so Meshri currently is in its 0.5 release. I think we're 0.5.37, and in the v0.6 release is when like the initial set of support for filters is supposed to land. So a lot of this that we're looking at, like bugs are expected, incomplete functionality is expected, but it looks like the project isn't isn't too far off. So this is interesting. Is this the same version that we were just looking at, or is this different?
Yeah, like I think Gaurav has some updates to the UI, but this is
I'll just push the updates for the details one, change it to the actions with all the configurations.
okay.
And for the namings of that Meshri filters, patterns, and applications that I've already updated.
Okay, got it. So Gaurav, in context of this filters user interface, have we tied together the ability for someone to identify a filter, go to apply it, and when they do, to identify the mesh that they want to apply it to?
No, not for identifying the filter, but the apply functionality will work.
Okay, so when they choose to apply the filter, is it the pattern file then that we're relying on that will identify the service
Yeah,
mesh?
it is fetching from the pattern file itself.
Okay. So in the update that you're pushing now, is there an apply action?
Yep, there will be an apply action similar to the patterns one.
Okay. When someone clicks to apply, just from that interface alone, how will we know which service mesh to apply that to?
Yep, we need to see that from the console itself with activating the Istio adapters that I have tested earlier. So in the networks tab, that we can see that the filter is successfully applied. But for the visual perspective, in future we will have something modal or any sort of another page or something in the filter UI itself, so that we can visualize that this service has been applied and it's being activated.
Okay. Okay, so right now we're not giving, we don't have the ability to allow people to select which type of service mesh to apply the filter to necessarily.
Yeah.
Okay, if you go to under management, if you go to Istio, so today we allow, Meshri provides people the ability to apply a certain pre-built filters that are, hard-coded into the Meshri release. In the future, as we go to release .60, and Meshry allows people to upload their own custom filters and then apply those. We'll need to, so Gaurav will need, like the challenge will be in helping people identify what filter to apply to what mesh.
Yeah.
Do you have a design for that already? Like, I don't mean a mock-up, I mean like a system design in which you would provide that ability?
Mm. Yep, not as a current design, but yep, it is necessary, so we can have that as soon as possible.
Okay, got it. Good. Okay. So that's that topic. So Navendu, the second half of the topic that you raised is, so Navendu, you're running on, well, Apple Silicon. So you're running like an M1 style chip. And so Meshry is in the process of, I think, upgrading to the latest version of Golang 1.16. And as it does, it will be then be able to produce Meshry binaries that are compatible with, Apple Silicon, which is great. Although it sounds like some of the service meshes that Meshry manages, so Istio specifically, if you're running, it's having some compatibility challenges. And I think that that's more of a Kubernetes thing. Sounded like the affinity policies that you can define with Kubernetes like weren't necessarily working on Apple Silicon. Is anybody familiar with this challenge? Because this isn't something that Meshry is, directly accountable for, but the underlying systems supporting. Anybody running, anyway, I don't know, anyone familiar with that? Anybody running Apple Silicon or have a Kubernetes system on that?
I think like it's an Envoy based issue. Like I tried running Linkerd and I was able to get it running.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Okay, so you were running Kubernetes on, what are you running on your Mac? Docker desktop?
Yeah, Docker desktop.
Okay. Okay. So far, Kubernetes on Docker desktop on M1 seems to work. Linkerd deploys.
I'm not actually being able to make it work. Like I use Docker desktop too, but my Kubernetes doesn't seem to work. Like I've enabled it, but it still doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I kind of want, I mean, like of the issue that I saw described for Envoy, it was more of a Kubernetes issue than anything else.
Yeah. I keep getting that Kubernetes config is not initialized for Meshry, like every time I try to deploy it.
Does anybody know what the status of Kubernetes support for Apple Silicon is, just in general? Okay, well okay. So anyway, so Vendu, sounds like you'll be more successful if you use a Kubernetes running on a remote system. So we should be sure to get you access to one. Can you work with Abhishek on that?
Yeah, sure. I think I have GCP cluster with me. I think I'll try with that.
Okay. Okay. So Gaurav, to be clear, so we need a design session. Sounds like both for just for the system flow itself. So I think so in terms of Meshery pattern files, they do capture and let you characterize filters. I've seen them be successfully applied, and I think you're saying that you're able to successfully apply them. That's good. And so one thing that we'll need to kind of come to, and maybe like Joshua, actually, your insights here, your perspective might be quite helpful. That's from the perspective of Meshery's user interface. The question becomes, where is it that? By the way, is anyone running Meshery now? So Navendu or Gaurav, can you guys bring back up the interface, because we want to. The thing that we need to talk about here is from within the UI, what controls do we want to empower the user with to be able to apply filters? Like, it may not be appropriate that from that filters table that someone would necessarily, that they would manage filters and their configuration there, but maybe when they want to apply that filter, that might be done from a different UI. And so it would be good to kind of explore that together and see what might make the most intuitive sense. So Navendu or Gaurav, can you guys share? If not, I'll spin up Meshery.
Oh, I think I don't have the UI built. Let me just try.
Okay.
I have it. May I share?
Please.
Yep. Here it is. So
Yeah. So let me put Joshua on the spot, if I can, in the most friendly of ways. Joshua, if you think about the notion that you're running like an Istio, a service mesh and Istio system, maybe. You've got a set of an application, or maybe all of your applications that you want to have certain filters run against or in front of. Sorry, for a second I thought we lost Joshua, but no, he's. Here's so the user interface for manipulating and apply, like the act of configuring your mesh and applying those filters. Let's talk about that some. So currently there's sort of two interfaces. There's technically there's three, but there's like two interfaces today, or three interfaces, I guess. Okay, technically there's like four interfaces where you can go manage these things and apply them. So one is to just manage the individual binaries themselves, the filters, and a little bit of config that they carry. And that's in this tabular form that we're seeing here. You upload your filter, Meshery holds onto it for you. It tracks the small configuration for you, and you can do CRUD operations around that. Eventually, Meshery will interface with Git and help you do versioning of your filters and versioning of the config. So the question becomes, okay, that's one UI. Another UI is that of Rudraksh. I don't know if you're running. Are you running an adapter as well? So this other UI is on the service mesh itself and configuring the mesh. And so Joshua, the question is, I know it can be a little bit like this might be, you might need more info, but the question is to help think aloud about where it is a user might expect to configure their filter, how they might go about applying the filter to an individual proxy, to a set of proxies based on an application. Talk about this with us, if you would. Are you using proxies or filters today?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. And
And so we have two use cases, right? One is we have a bunch of edge filter, right? It's not necessarily in a mesh environment, but purely edge, right? And we also have a few of the filters that goes in the service mesh. So
nice. So I'm glad I asked. First of all, that first use case, that's perfect. Like that's something that we should facilitate for. Like that's not necessarily that difficult to support either.
yeah. So in my current project is Envoy for both as an edge proxy, right? So right behind our F5 and the load balancer, we have edge proxy, like a bunch of the fleet of Envoy. Plus on the service layer, right, in the service mesh, we have our sidecars with Envoy, but we have custom control plane. It's not using SDO.
Yeah. That's great. That's an even better second use case.
Yeah.
Which actually sort of lends itself to, like in terms of the approach to helping facilitate, to providing hopefully some helpful management capabilities. Like they're both somewhat similar to the extent that Meshery might reach out to those envoys individually.
Yeah, and then I was looking at it and I was like, oh yeah, we definitely see we have a use case, right, to be able to have something like Meshery, right, be able to apply that filter, right, and we don't have an elegant solution right now to be able to go to UI and upload those WASM files and get them applied in.
Yeah.
Initially for testing purpose, for example, right? Initially, we want this filter to apply, as you were saying, like only a subset of sidecars, right, or services, and then you want to apply them globally across the mesh. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and how do you? I imagine there's a couple of other challenges within there as well, as like, yeah, as part of selectively applying those filters. Also, what tooling is there for you to redirect traffic to those filters to see if they're doing what you want them to do?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not redirecting traffic, maybe it's generating traffic. Maybe it's some simple load that's generated, or maybe it's like traffic that's been captured and you want to replay against it because it's a set of interactions, or it's like a specific sequence of requests, not just like the same request, and then watching that behavior.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not right now. We don't have anything as remotely sophisticated as that. It's mostly a bunch of scripts. And that's where I was looking at Meshery, right, and say, oh, we will be able to leverage some of these for our work. So
hopefully this ends up being pleasant. But let me say this: that good. You're the. Let's chase after your use case. I mean, we've got a ton of contributors here. And we've got you, the user.
Yeah.
So let us help you, or there's a lot of things that we would like to get to. Some of the things that we just described, like one of those things that we'd like to get, and please be brutal and like help guide part of the focus here. So one of those things that we had considered is, well, a filter, just like a workload that you have deployed, or just like a service mesh that you have deployed, or an Envoy, they all have configuration that needs to be managed. They all have different versions of each. They're all pieces of software that are running under different versions, and that the filters themselves, especially if they're, well, I guess I should say especially, but whether they're a custom home written filter or just an off the shelf filter, that they themselves are going to have their own versions. They might be changed, and so that's part of the concept here around why it is that you might load a filter into Meshry is to give users control over what versions are being applied, or the fact that there are versions, because maybe that's something that's kept, that like you're keeping inside your version control system like GitHub. And so that's one of the things that Meshry aspires to do is Meshry, the Meshry cloud provider, when you sign in using when you social auth using GitHub, it asks to connect to, it asks for permission to be able to auth. And in the future, the notion there is that it would subsequently in the UI, it would say, oh, did you want Meshry to look for filters that you have in your repos? And like, and here's the ones that we think that Meshry found, or Meshry would facilitate part of that interaction. And then also help with like retrieving, if you're depending upon, the assumption is that a lot of the time people are going to have maybe their own existing versioning set up for their custom filters. And so Meshry just wants, in that regard, would try to just complement provide some interconnectivity, so provide the missing gap between your source control system and then the management of your infrastructure. And so it would be a sort of a tool in between.
Yeah.
In other cases, maybe there's not a lot of emphasis given to the versioning that's there, and they want for more of that to happen within Meshry. I don't think the goal isn't to make Meshry a source control or the goal right now isn't to make Meshry a source control system, but rather to leverage source.
I see a value, right? I mean, that approach, and I do know that in my current work, right, this is where something we struggle with, right? We don't really have a way to look at one single pane of glass, right? For example, a UI, and say, okay, these are the currently running version of or sidecar or what have you, right? Or including or filter version currently running. So it's a tedious process right now, and I do see that having especially in an environment where auditing and all kinds of other regulatory requirements are there. This is really valuable to be able to go to one UI and say, okay, this is the version running, and so.
Nice. I'm taking notes. Yeah, it's like which filters are currently running? What are the versions of those filters? Where are they running? Part of that, then I'm sure that like in the type of environment that you're describing, like it goes quite a bit deeper. It's things like, well, like an audit log might be nice. Like who applied or when was that applied? Sort of who had applied that? Hey, how is it doing? Is there overhead? What overhead is associated with that particular filter? And maybe what's the overhead now versus the version that was running earlier?
Previously, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great.
Or things like, oh, maybe if there's filters that are chained, maybe there's like, two filters because one does one thing, the other one does it. And so in what sequence are the, is that sequence correct? Like, are they chained in the right way? I mean, I guess there's a lot.
Can I ask? I have one more question I wanted to ask before, right? When we're showing the UI, so when we upload the WASM file, is there a scan run behind the scene to make sure that doesn't have any, vulnerabilities or something like that?
That's a great question. We should write that down. Meshry doesn't, but that's a good use case for like for those scans that might be run today. Someone might have integrated, like if whatever source control system that is being used, there may be security scanning going on there, and so exposing the status of that in Meshre's UI to be able to then tell people, hey, okay, so not only are you telling me what filters are running, what their version are, but also the fact that certain versions have what the disposition of what their security posture is for each of the currently running filters. Like while Meshre may not have a security scanning system built in, the fact that it could source that information and then show you that. Out of curiosity, are there particular systems? So like, as I've mentioned GitHub as the first source control system of focus. Is GitHub interfacing with GitHub? Is that helpful in your environment?
For us, it's GitLab.
Okay, that's okay. And then, do you know, is there static analysis or other vulnerability scanning that's happening?
Yes, static. So especially for these uploads, right? We search for all this, malware and stuff like that. So Clam AV is, I think it's a freeware, right? It's an open source product that's we use.
Okay.
And there are other but they're all commercial, like Fortify and all, right? So MicroStrategy, Fortify scans.
The version of GitLab that's being run, this is, well, I guess maybe this is an ignorant question. It's a self-hosted instance that you're all running.
Actually, yes, it's a because I'm with the Oracle, but it's a internally managed, hosted within Oracle infra.
Okay, got you.
So I think it is pretty, the latest version. They keep upgrading as they, release new features. So,
okay.
So what we see in GitLab Cloud, right? It is pretty close to that. Maybe a few minor versions down, but it is very close.
Okay.
They have GitLab also has the free, just like GitHub, right? We have some free accounts you could create. So
right. GitLab.com. Yeah, makes sense. And unlike some Atlassian products, I'm sure that GitLab's APIs are largely the same between the two, between their cloud hosted and their.
Yes, it is actually same. Yeah. And I see it is very close to GitHub. It's no big difference if you know one, right? I think it is. You already know the other one. That close there.
Makes sense. Okay, so those use cases, all of those make sense. Does well, say a little bit more, if you would, about the procedure or the practices that you all use to, well, I don't want to roll out another, either test or roll out, or you'd mentioned some scripts, but actually maybe Joshua, it might be one of those things to ask you some of these questions and then have you speak more to it next time we meet about,
sure.
Okay, here's the pain, here's kind of what we're currently doing, and here's the pain that here's the areas, here's where it hurts.
Yeah. Okay. So mainly from a dev, that process standpoint. So the process is, a developer, right, create a custom filter, and we run our Kubernetes in or our application in a kind cluster, right, locally, meaning on their dev environment. And then we have some scripts to it's basically a bunch of shell script and a Go program. I think it is a combination of both to deploy these apps along with this sidecars, right, in that Kubernetes infrastructure, and then run again a set of tests, like all automated tests that run against it. And it goes to, once the test pass, right, a classic, the source control check-in happen, and then automatic deployment from there to production infrastructure. So that's how the pipeline typically works. But it's not right away, right? Obviously the deployment part is kind of based on the need, right? It may not happen. It's more of a manual trigger rather than an automated process.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's triggered. That manual trigger is fired one only after those tests have passed.
Yeah.
It sounded like only after those tests have passed does the filter is it that PR for that filter merges?
Yes,
Or-
it PR merges, right? And then the deployer project, I mean, it's again another set of Go routines, right? I mean, it's a Go application, and it looks at the filter and applies certain, annotation on top of our, mesh, right? To accept those filter and the path where it is downloaded from. So the filter goes into a central repository, and then it gets downloaded like something like wget, right? Downloads and then it gets applied through that annotation.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
and that's where we have issues, right? Because we don't have good way to manage those versioning. We don't know which version. So it is there. It is it is completely depend on the developer, right, or the person who develops this filter to be able to make sure that those the versioning is done and it's numbered correctly and all. It is not like what I really want to see. So when there is a problem, right, and what we don't know, it is really caused by the filter because it was working before, now it is not working because there are so many people are making so many changes at once, right? And it's been deployed. So be able to track those directly on the UI. Okay, this is running this filter and that is not applied on that, on that sidecar, and probably there's a incompatibility causing this issue. So those kind of issues are what we are facing right now. It's a long, we don't have a silver bullet or a fix, right? It is a slow process. So when I look at the, your presentation and how you guys are doing, like, oh, we could adopt that.
Yeah. I think I speak for everyone else on the call when we say, good, we want you to, you should use it, or we want you to use it. Like, yeah, those make a lot of, especially that last one. I mean, all of the things you described make a lot of sense in terms of the pain, where you face pain. And like, particularly, it's probably most intense when you're troubleshooting an production environment that like the packets aren't getting to where they need to go, or they're getting there slowly, or some transformation isn't happening. And so it's like, okay, is it the filter? Okay, which filter is applied? When did it get applied? Is it the filter's fault? Like there's a litany of like, there's a lot of sleuthing that has to go on to sort of begin to eliminate things and
exactly,
so,
especially in a multi-region deployment, right? Our application runs and it's all cross-region traffic. It gets it's really difficult if we don't have a full view of the entire the infrastructure and the version and what change made where and stuff like that. It's really difficult. Okay.
and
So we are feeling the pain right now.
well, then I'm glad I asked, because this helps guide part of the focus. Let me ask you this: I'm no Kiali, so part of what I think helps eliminate pain is being able to visually see not only where things are deployed, all the stuff that we just described, also like where active packets are going and what's happening to them as they move through the infrastructure. So being able to visually diagram that is, I think quite helpful, quite illuminating. Kiali comes to mind as, as the most closely related project or open source project that relates to one of the plugins that's being built on top of Meshry.
Okay.
And that plugin is, it's about to go into an alpha testing. It's called Mesh Map. It's a visual topology. And not that Meshry proper, or not that Meshry itself it's designed to, or we're trying to design it to help answer those very same questions, like this thing is there and this is configured in this way, which is helpful to see it laid out in a tabular format, or helpful to see it laid out, in text or what have you, but even more illuminating, I think, when it's visually described. And so I guess I was going to ask, like, Kiali it sounds like Kiali isn't necessarily something that you guys are able to benefit from, in part, like probably in large part because A, I don't know if it actually meets some of the use cases you've described, but then B, because it's not an Istio control plane. So
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
we are not Istio control plane right now.
Sure. And as you say that, does that hint towards the potential future with Istio, or potential future
Yes,
with?
actually, that's the direction. So we have some, internal challenges, like a more bureaucratic in nature, right? So you're working through that, and I think eventually we will go either an SDR or a Linkerd control plane, right? Is the direction. So we don't know which one right now.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Not that there has to be a deep answer to the rest of this, but just out of curiosity, considering, well, if there is an investment in filters, and considering like Kuma and open service meshes and console, their use of Envoy, is there consideration for, is that still like an open question for you all? Like
for the mesh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is no. So we have some, because it's coming under the huge corporate umbrella, right? There is some type of audit or whatever done on these two, and the choices between these two.
Gotcha.
I don't even know whether they have even looked at others. So
yeah, it can be such a sensitive. Yeah. I get what you mean. It's such a sensitive type question, and such a big question, and so. Okay, this is quite helpful.
okay, so what I will do, I think in the next meeting I'll come prepared with a little more, maybe I can dig deeper into my use case, so see how we could improve this one.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be really helpful. It'll actually directly speak to some of the things that we were gonna ask about. Yeah, so certain things that Meshry might do, like it'll directly inform them. So that's great.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a jump now. I have another meeting to attend. So thanks, Lee. So we'll chat later.
See you in a week.
Yep.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right. So we are at time. Anyone have anything else they needed to urgently cover today? I think just for me, I guess I'm not entirely sure. Like, I think that Meshry is able to successfully deploy pattern or filters using patterns. I think that is true. I've heard that from a couple of folks, but I also am, like, Utkarsh, can you correct me if that's wrong?
No, I think patterns has been filters via patterns has been tested. Although I think a few things still needs to be tested. That is like applying custom filter with custom configuration. So those things are still remain to be tested. But in general, basically the flow has been tested completely as far as
So where are we at with respect to tracking the filter config versus the service mesh config for the filter?
So I think last time we concluded that the pattern itself is going to take in the service mesh configuration, the service mesh config, and it will also contain within that same configuration, it will contain the filter specific configuration. And so basically the same thing, the same structure covers both of the use cases. That is having a mesh specific configuration as well as the filter specific configuration.
And yeah, actually, to the extent that the filter configuration is just a string, like that makes a lot of sense. So Navendu and Gaurav, are those two things being tracked independently or just as a single entity?
I think for the custom filter configuration, that is tracked separately from that.
Okay, and then when we go to apply the filter, it sounds like, are we merging the filter config with the service mesh, with the pattern file that has the service mesh config?
Yep. Yeah, we are taking reference from that pattern only.
Okay, maybe so. All right, so maybe before we meet next time, it sounds like an end-to-end review, I think, will be helpful. Like there's a lot of confusing new stuff in here, so it'll probably help everyone. If Utkarsh, if you take us through, like, help clarify this for us, like where are these things being stored? I think it applied. And if we were able to empower, I know we have sample configs out there, but if we're able to empower the rest, everyone else that's on the call with, like, hey, here's maybe it's image hub, or maybe it's, but here's the sample config that you should use and you can try, and this is how that works. From the sounds of it, with either provider, they should be able to, by the time that we have that discussion, they should be able to manage filters, or both of the providers should be on par, I would think, if they're not already. So good. Okay. Well, I guess we've got next week's agenda lined up. Well, a couple of things. Okay. Is that it? Anybody have anything else? Nice. Good. It was a good call. I thought we weren't going to have anything to discuss. That's not the case. Okay. All right. See you all very soon. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Lee. Bye.
But
Bye.
Bye.